So in this tutorial we're going to be looking at simple and fast urban sketching for beginners. Now the reference drawing for this video was one that was posted by somebody who I follow on Instagram called Bernard Sombre. An example here of the reference drawing. I can put some lines over the top of that and I can show you really what lines I would typically sketch. You know, what would I be looking for? What am I trying to show with the line work? So here what I'm doing for the windows and for that front area is I am just choosing some sort of very rough demarcations. This is a form of continuous line drawing in a sense. I'm trying to keep the nib on the paper. I'm trying to be super loose. So one of the things I quite often forget to talk about is materials. Now here for this simple urban sketching, I'm using probably a couple of different brushes. I'm going to start off with this 3/4 flat brush, 3/4 inch flat brush. I'm using some Daniel Smith paints, some watercolours here. I would recommend starting, if you're going to buy a set of watercolours, start with something simple like a Derwent, Winsor and Newton, you know, something that's not too expensive. And not start with a maximum of 12 colours. You don't need anything special. And if you progress with it and you want to invest in some better quality ones like Deep Light or Daniel Smith, you can go down that route. So here the first thing I'm going to do, which is quite typical of my urban sketching, is I'm going to mix up a little lovely blue for that sky. Now I think this paper is, what is this paper? Oh yeah, this is my Cardi pad. I've done a lot of drawing in this recently. So what I'm doing with this flat brush is I'm not getting too bogged down in like perfect painting. I'm using it a little bit like, well, I'm using it like a trowel almost, where I'm just kind of bringing in some lines. The sort of theory behind this is it's kind of sympathetic with the built environment. You know, you have blocks of colour and it's more regular, even though it is quite irregular with the spatters, than you would if you had a more landscape type vibe to it, if you know what I mean. I don't know whether it works. I love it. It's a lot of fun to do. I know that much. So also as well, you can wait for that to dry before you go in and add some other colours, otherwise you're going to get a significant amount of bleeding between one area and the next. Or you can leave it wet in wet and just paint oblivious of that, and that gives you a very different feel. I think that gives you a much looser feeling than if you actually wait for things to dry. There, did you see that blue there just coming in? It's a very different approach, but a lot of fun. Now there you're also going to see some of the blue bleeding into the front of the building. So what I'm doing here is I'm blocking in some colour. I'm using this Monte Mito, I can never remember it, natural sienna, but it's basically a kind of cream, very pale, creamy pigment. And what I'm doing is I'm just going in. I've dried my brush there because I wanted to pull out a little bit of that blue. I don't want too much of that blue bleeding in there. So I'm trying to get a bit of coverage in terms of the overall building. So here on the right hand side, I'm just adding in some arbitrary sort of shadow areas. I don't want to get too bogged down with detail there. And that shadow is a little bit of quinacridone rose, a little bit of burnt umber. No, not burnt umber, it's Van Dyke brown. And I'm also using it as a sort of provisional shadow layer, but I'm going to go in there and develop that at a later stage. So I'm just adding in a little bit of transparent red oxide to that pearl orange, and I'm just doing that roofing. Now this is not wholly dry, as you can see if you look at the left hand side of the roof there. It's still bleeding a little bit into the sky, but that's kind of, don't mind that. Also it's quite scruffily painted and it's bleeding a little bit into the area underneath. I don't mind that. I'm just taking a little bit more of blue there, a bit of purple I'm mixing and just dropping it in to that roof, so we have a bit of irregularity. I don't necessarily want it to be one super flat colour. So the next stage of this one is an interesting one, because what I do is I decide to just paint in the awning. But what I've realised is, because I've got quite a lot of wet paint around it, the awning is going to go very, very soft and mushy. It's going to basically go everywhere. Now I look at this and I think, do I like that? Is that what I want? So I'm taking that out. Now the reason I'm doing that is because one of the things I really like about this technique, this very scruffy technique, is you get some areas where you have soft paint running into other paint. But if you get too much of it, I think you kind of lose the effect, which is the reason why I'm just dabbing it out of the sky there as well. So what I decided to do is take that away and hairdry it. So now that's back from the hairdryer, I can start to add in some details, and they're not going to go too soft, and they're not going to bleed in with other things. But what I've effectively got there is a really lovely sort of underpainting. So I can start adding in some shadow details, such as the windows and the bits on top of the windows, bits under the shutters, the lee of the roof, and things like that. Here I'm going to go quite bold, and I'm going to go and just add in that shadow that runs under the awning there. Now I should probably use a more pointy brush for that corner, but it doesn't matter. And this is a quinacridone rose mix with a little bit of French ultramarine and a tiny dot of Van Dyke brown. Adding in just a bit of Van Dyke brown there, and then I'm pulling it out. So do you think that was on purpose, or do you think that was because I made a mistake? What do you think? It's because I made a mistake, because I put it in and I thought it's just a bit too heavy, but not that heavy, if you know what I mean. So I was like, what do I do with it? I know, I'll just pull it out. So I'm mixing a little bit of Pyrrole orange up here, and I'm going to use that for that sign up there, that lovely red sign. As you can see, this style of simple, fast urban sketching is loose, and some of the decisions that you're going to make as you're doing it aren't always going to be the best decisions, or ultimately going to end up looking the best. But the whole point of it is you're playing, you're trying stuff. You're going to put the shadowing first. Sometimes you might put the shadows in last. You might put the window detail in first. You might put it in last. The whole point of this play is it is just free fun. It's a little bit like a sandpit, you know. It really doesn't matter at the end result, as long as you have fun, fixing stuff. My kids have got this thing called the invention station that we made for them, and it's a lot of cardboard boxes and sellotape and like random stuff, and they can just build stuff out of it. And that's how I occasionally want my art to be, you know. I want it to be just fun. And here I'm painting in that awning, trying to leave a little bit of space to try and show some of the kind of wobbly details on that awning. It isn't actually like that very much in real life, but I just want to try and add a little bit of contrast there. I think it's fun. One of the things I love the most about this kind of form of art, you know, the fast urban sketching, messy vibe, is you get a real sense of liveliness to the picture. They really make my heart sing, they really do. I did some sketching like this recently with some friends, and it was half an hour sitting on a wall in Saltaire. And I did this sketch, which I was really super proud of. I'll put it up on the screen here. And that's that same feeling. It's a really lovely, loose, vibrant feeling that's just so full of joy. So it's a slightly different technique here. What I'm doing for these windows is I'm going to do, because we are slightly looking up. So sometimes when you look up at windows, you get a little bit of the blue sky reflected in the window. And not always. So I'm doing them slightly differently than I would normally do them here. So as you can see, I'm adding in a little bit more detail now. Underneath that awning, we've got that poster area. Some of the white. There's some black posters there, and we've got some orange posters, and then there's a wooden door frame, which presumably, I think this is a cafe or something, I would have thought. It looks quite French to me. And yeah, so I'm just going to go and fill in some more of these really simple details. We've got that lovely blue sign there that would be the street sign. So I mixed up a little bit of grey, and I'm going to add that in to the bottom of the windows. So we have the sort of blue reflected at the top, and then the grey reflected in the bottom. I could go into the sort of boring science behind all that, but honestly, it's really not worth it. You'd forget something really important if I told you that, like your PIN number or something. So for some last details now, I'm just adding in a little bit of real darkness in that bottom window there, which is probably too dark, because actually I want the sort of posts in the foreground to be very dark. And I'm also going to add in a little bit of shadow in the top. I think there is like a gutter running around there, so it is going to be quite dark. So I'm using a fine liner here, and I'm just going to be adding in a few other little details. I've put in a couple of little shadows and some of the window sills and things like that. And I'm going to be adding in a couple of details on that sign. Also, that post there in the foreground, making that a little bit darker. And also that post in the foreground, and that one too. So here with the white gel pen, I'm adding in some abstract little things on the sign. And the chances are I'll, do something similar on the road sign. And there's not really a huge amount more to do. I could make those posts in the foreground a lot darker, things like that, but I'm really tinkering here. I think one of the lovely things about these kind of sketches is they are slightly unfinished, they are a very, very relaxed vibe about them, and they don't want to look too precious. Otherwise they lose that lovely, vivacious kind of speed to them, if that makes sense. So what's this last little bit here, eh? Oh, doing the louvers. Swanky. So I do hope you enjoyed that. It's a really fun one. I think simple and fast urban sketching is great for beginners because it's accessible, you can be messy, you can just be really expressive and really learn as you go. For my full lessons, do check out my Patreon, where for a small amount a month you can have access to all my back catalogue of things. Go grab a sketchbook and have a play and just have fun. Thanks guys. Bye bye.